Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Bruce.
And I'm your host, Pete.
And we are The Epic Experiment.
If you're new to the show, we talk about all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on primarily playing Commander.
Our show is available on thelotuscouncil.com, your favorite podcast apps, and a variety of social media platforms.
If you want to reach out to us, check the show notes below for our contact information.
Now, on with the show.
Let's get after it. Hey, Bruce.
Going to go.
Did you... I'm sorry, I'm so excited. You saw Brian Kibler this weekend, right?
I watched the Pro Tour, and I loved his deck. That was super cool. Did you catch any of it?
Yeah, I watched briefly when he played... I forget the guy's name, or the person's name. They have... it's a non-binary person. They have a very, very cool name. I don't remember the person's name. Etienne, I think?
Etienne. Yeah, he was... yeah. Okay, I saw...
Etienne. Beautiful match, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Both individuals did a great job.
Yeah.
They both played some really spicy brews, and that got us thinking about what we want to talk about this week. So I sent you 2 YouTube videos, Bruce, and I'm glad you're able to have some time away to think about them and synthesize them a bit. So we're going to talk about 2 content creator YouTube video links that we found that were interesting. One was about game theory, and the other one is more about deck building and EDH-related matters. So to kick things off, there's a thing that this account on YouTube was talking about called the 1 mana problem in EDH, most directly MTG. He didn't really mention EDH, but it was like an idea about how the game has changed. So the Pro Tour really reminded us of this sort of change that we've seen in our own formats, as well as in 60-card Magic, because of the speed and the essence of the game. So, Bruce, do you want to provide a little bit more information?
Absolutely.
Just because I know this is very this is up your alley. I know you've been in the game a bit longer than me too. I'm sure you've seen more dramatic changes as well.
Well, yeah. So essentially, what this particular content creator was postulating, that Magic has a problem in the sense that as the game has continued to evolve and power creep continues to be a thing, what we're seeing is a proclivity of 1-drop cards that are coming into play and are dramatically impacting competitive formats. And this is preferable to playing more expensive and potentially more powerful spells, but they don't ever have the impact that they might have had in other times, because the power of 1-drops is increasing. So basically, the math that he was presenting was that 1-drops are now reaching a power point where they are probably the best thing you could be doing in most instances in a competitive format. Because let's imagine you have a 1-drop creature that is very powerful, and your opponent ends up playing a 2-mana spell. The question you have to ask yourself, is their 2-mana spell 2 times more powerful than your 1-drop? And typically the answer is probably not. So you're now incentivized to therefore play more of the 1-drop spells, because if you can deploy 3 or 4 of these spells in a singular go, compared to your opponent's maybe 2 2-drops, then you're going to be advantaged in a position where you're going to win. And he's postulating this in a way that's what we've seen. And not necessarily just in 1-drops, but as the power curve... the power creep has mounted, you see the efficiency of spells...
It's
all leading to back to power creep.
It's like a response directly to mono red burn, like the mono red deck we've seen in standard for a while, and the Convoke deck as well, right? It basically epitomizes those deck styles where it's like by turn 3 or 4 you have 3 times as many resources out as your opponent, and they can't do anything about it. It's an interesting concept. But
it's an interesting concept, and things like Thraben Inspector, Voldaren Epicure, Siren's, the 1-mana Siren from LCI that
Spyglass Siren.
So they're 1-drops. They make an extra artifact to come into play. They're all very highly sought. Like, they're all heavily played in competitive formats right now because they're, the counterpart at 2 mana is not necessarily inherently better than what they offer you. And they can be used and deployed, and you can cast a slew of them all in one fell swoop, or you can use them for other advantages. So this is sort of what's happening in the game of Magic. And he's postulating that this is a problem that Magic's having, because it's pushing the power level of decks up, meanwhile reducing their curve on their deck. And I take some umbrage with this, and we'll talk about it in a second. I take some umbrage with this because this translates very well to 60 card format, where you're playing either standard or pioneer or modern, where like you're playing those resources and deploying them against a singular opponent. But what he neglects to mention, and I think is a big hole in this discussion, is that Commander being one of the most popular formats for playing the game, this equation doesn't necessarily translate. And so we see these 1-drops appear, and people who may not be aware of all the nuances around playing, like you might see a really good 1-drop, like Thraben Inspector, and you say, oh, I'm going to put my Thraben Inspector in my white deck. And Thraben Inspector is a great card. But let's be very realistic about what Thraben Inspector offers you in a Commander table. When you spend 1 mana to play your Thraben Inspector, you've deployed a card. You're 1/2. It makes a clue token. Meanwhile, your opponents have spent none of their cards and are all up 1 comparatively to your card, and they can and will deploy cards that are going to be twice as powerful or more than what that is offered, because they have the whole gamut of what the game has to offer. So while these 1-drop cards are very impactful, as a heuristic to go and look at them simply and say, well, we should play more 1-drops, is not necessarily what we should be looking for in Commander, because every time you play a 1-drop, you're using one of your 100 card slots in your deck to play a card that has modest to minimal impact on the game, and your opponents have not deployed any of their resources yet. One last thing before you jump in, though. Yeah. The last piece that you add into that conversation is that you imagine in a situation later in the game where you draw a 1-drop and you're hoping that it's going to get you in a situation, because typically in a game of Commander, you're most often going to be at parity or behind, meaning that you draw a 1-drop and you're looking to get out from being behind your opponent, and the 1-drop's unlikely going to be what's going to pull you out of that nosedive so you can right the ship and get back on track. So I think that this heuristic doesn't translate as well to our format. There are lessons to be taken from it, and we can talk about that in a second, but it's not necessarily the blind adherence to the idea of playing more 1-drops that's going to be the solution to helping you win your next Commander game.
That's not to say that 1-drops themselves
Far from it.
Should be avoided. The best 1-drops that I've played in specific decks are cards that create value for me late in the game and early in the game. So Dockside Chef is one of my favorite black cards to run. Mistress Seer, obviously many people run that card and it does wonders for decks. Any of the mana dorks, obviously it's never bad to have extra mana in late game, as well as on turn 1, 2, or 3. But we kind of came up with this idea of the 2-drop problem.
Yes.
Because all of save for Skull Clamp and all of these other 1-drops, Aluria Shepherd and CDH staples that you see Esper Sentinel and stuff like that, we really see a lot of an influx of these 2-drops that are pushed. And they don't even have to be rares or expensive cards like Bowmasters or anything like that. It could be as simple as a 1/3, Archivist, the Aftermath Archivist, which is a 1/3 that you pay for and sack it to basically do a World Shaper, where you get all your lands back from your graveyard. It's a Splendid Reclamation on a body, which is a very, very pushed green ramp style thing that could definitely push you over the top. So we were kind of coming up with some examples here. So the obvious ones are Dockside, Extortionist, Dauthi Voidwalker, Sithis, Thassa's Oracle. But we were looking at other cards like Pia Nalar and Lotho.
Lotho is a big one that people have forgotten about from the Lord of the Rings, but Lotho is a very, very impactful card.
Goes ham, right?
Absolutely.
With all its mana production. But yeah, the idea is like a lot of people are playing more 2-drops, more efficient cards. So this sort of discussion that this creator had was basically this idea of like how we're utilizing our resources and what is our time limit.
Right. And I think the lesson that we can take from this is, as much as like, I'm taking umbrage with the focus on 1-drops, it does speak to playing efficient cards that are going to generate significant value from you, and that we should be on the lookout for these sorts of cards when we are evaluating new sets. And since they come out fairly regularly now, like we're now in a bit of a lull, basically. We're waiting for Modern Horizons 3 to drop, which is going to be, people are like waiting on bated breath.
Juice.
Well, we're anticipating bated breath. Like, what are we going to see? Like, are we going to see more of these really pushed, inexpensive mana cards that you're going to allow you to continue this trend? Because our format, like, if you can play, like, Dockside Extortionist is an outstanding card, and it generates an absurd amount of value for you, and
practically nothing.
And so the reality becomes that if this is what's going to be the way forward, like, what's the next one or next, inexpensively costed cards that are going to really help drive the format forward and push our curves down? I'm going to back the Wayback Machine. In 2014, when I started to play, 6 and 7 drops were not uncommon to be seen in commander decks. And you can even think about my own decks today that I build. I build with very few, 6 drops, almost 0 7 drops, unless they are truly well and truly deserving, like, game-ending bombs that are going to.
Or you have the ramp to do it. Yeah. It doesn't even matter that it's a 7-drop for you, because it's really a 4-drop in your deck. So that reminds me of like mana cost, like the idea, like equipment, right? I've seen a lot less people playing equipment decks in general because of how awkward the mana becomes. Because it's 3 mana and then you pay 2, so it's really 5 mana. But there's potential where you play it on turn 3 and you can't do anything with it. So like turn 3 and 4 are really our sweet spot when it comes to how the game is played now, where like I'm getting frustrated with trying to build like an equipment deck that I had for a while, because I mean, I love Shuko, but will Shuko win me the game? I don't really think so. But then a Sword of Feast and Famine could, but then it's very awkward with the mana production and the amount of mana you have to invest in these cards. So the mana investment is the other thing that I really think comes out of this discussion. Is a lot of these 1-drops, these 2-drops, these 3-drops even, the investment is a lot easier to pull off. There's not as much of a cost, and then as there is a reward to like benefit and pay off of these cards. For some of these cards that are expensive, that are really good in like Modern, like the swords are fantastic, right? Hammer Time is a great deck, but in like Commander, in this awkward sort of situation that we present ourselves with, how do we adjust for this? So, like activated abilities too. I mean, they're printing tons of cards with activated abilities, creatures with activated abilities.
Well, I personally opinion that I think Training Grounds has never been more impactful, or Zerda. Like, these are the cards that like are going to help drive your activated cost right down to make that a more palatable cost to spend. So, like, I think those are cards that cards like that we should also be on the lookout for. Because I think you're right. If you're seeing a 3-drop, but a 3-drop that comes with an activated ability, you're like, well, now there's something more to get my attention, and really, make me consider whether this is a piece for my next deck or not.
It's also like the amount of investment. So like, it's a lot of these cards that have an activated ability, they really don't cost 2 mana or 1 mana. They cost like 7 mana in total, because ideally, like the Ancient one, it's 2 mana, it's an 8/8 that can't attack or block, but its activated ability is actually 4, so it's really a 6-drop. Yeah. Or it's like a 4, it's like on turn 4 you're actually using the card.
Right.
So it actually is like more than its actual mana cost is. So that's the other sort of consideration, to not to beat this conversation up, because I think we've exhausted a lot of it.
I think we've done a really good job of unpacking it. Yeah, but I think this is a really good spot right here before we go to our next article or next content creator, is to jump into some garbage or grade here. And actually, I have an example of a 1-drop that is actually a really strong card that actually sees some fringe standard play, because it has a lot of abilities, but would be an example of a card that I probably am less than excited about to play in Commander. So my garbage are great this week there, folks, is Rebuttal Maverick. I'll read it for you. It's a 1-drop card from Murders at Carlisle Manor. So, single green for a 1/1 human detective. When Rebel Maverick enters the battlefield, surveil 2. And then green, exile Rebel Maverick from your graveyard, put a +1 counter on target creature, activate only as a sorcery. So this is a common that has got an awful lot of important text on it that you can. It illustrates and speaks to the power creep that our content creator is addressing. This card does see play in standard. There's a mono green deck that's running around and plays these because you're looking to put +1/+1 counters on decks to our creatures to help trigger Kodama, so you can ramp even more crazy green mana on battlefield. So, single green mana to get a 1/1 body and surveil 2, and then has applicability in the late game. In standard, is a really useful card. This is a really good play on turn 1 in a deck where you have 4 copies of this and you can play it pretty reliably. In Commander, let's call a spade a spade. There are very few contexts where you would actually really want to play this card because of the fact that in most situations, this is not going to be the answer to help you dig out of whatever jam you're in. Maybe the surveil is relevant, maybe it's not. Maybe you need maybe the +1/+1 counter eventually is going to be useful, but it's unlikely to be the thing that turns the tide for you, and you might be better served finding a slightly better quality card to put in your deck instead of a card that, in many situations, is going to be really lackluster. Pete, any thoughts on this one as far as a piece of garbage or great?
I mean, I've seen this a lot in draft. I have never seen it in Commander.
No.
And I guess if you're able to continuously surveil with it for some reason, or you're skull clamping it or something.
Well, I think that's the best.
That's probably what people are doing.
Yeah, if anybody's playing it, you're playing this, getting the surveil, then you're clamping it and drawing the cards. But yeah. I mean, which is don't get me wrong, it has utility. But I think the quality of cards that you can find for your deck is better than what this card offers you. There's so many cards in Commander. We have such a gigantic card pool that while you could play this sort of card, it is it's kind of like a trap as far as I'm concerned. You're being encouraged to play because it does have applicability, and the but is huge here, big old asterisk beside it. I don't think that this is what you're needing to propel deck forward into a spot where you're going to be able to be advantaged to win.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think there's not much else that needs to be discussed.
No, and just to put it some context, like it appears in a grand total of 380 Commander decks. So it's like very low inclusion rate because I think the community as a whole has identified that while this card could be enticing in some formats, is not necessarily something that you're going to be looking for in a format like Commander, where this becomes a liability.
Yeah, that makes sense. The next card is from Strixhaven, actually.
Yep.
It appears in 9,629 decks. It is Introduction to Prophecy. So it's a 3 colorless sorcery that says scry 2, then draw a card.
So I can understand the appeal of this sort of card. This is being colorless makes this appealing because it can literally fit in any deck. Now, I'm presuming that the most common place this is going to occur, without having looked at the EDH rec page, is that this is going to go in your colorless commanders more frequently than anything else. So, I mean, the preponderance of like artifact commanders, because there's legendary artifacts like Karn, or you can play Eldrazi, or other colorless cards. You now get access to a useful but fairly minor ability on a card for 3 mana. And I'm going to be very honest. Sorcery speed, scry 2 draw card, like this. If this were an instant, I could be convinced. Because you find a turn where you open mana at the end of turn, jam it, and we're good to go. Okay, I'm in. But to have to spend my main phase of my turn doing this, I think to me strikes me as being a card that is low impact, and while it can be useful, I think is most cases going to be an underwhelming effect. So I would probably say I think this card would be on the weak side and probably garbage. In most decks, even the colorless ones, I would find something other to play instead of this.
So I think this card is low key good. Not only because I mean in the future, there's no surprise. There's an Eldrazi Precon coming out, an MH3, and colorless really doesn't have a lot of ways to move the deck in very efficient ways. So that's the obvious. The less than obvious for me is cards like Vadrix, which was a card that was listed in EDHREC, the one Night or Day reduces the cost. Any other cost reducers makes this cost 1 mana or 2 mana because it's colorless, and it could potentially be free. The other thing that I like about it is in decks that need the card advantage, like mono red, Storm, for example, not too bad of an option. I've been testing it out to see if it'll work. Because I wanted to have as much card draw as I could get in the red deck that I run with it.
Right.
But I just think, I don't know, I think it's such a flexible, easily, like, Preordain is not an expensive card like right now, it's like $1, but if you're not in blue and you don't have the option, it's not bad. I mean, it's not like an auto-include in every single deck that you run, but I think it's a fine budget option. So
I would agree.
And decks that need
I would agree it's a fine budget option, and
I don't know.
The fact that you can reduce the full casting cost to 0 because of the fact is colorless mana, it does have some measure of appeal. Like you can play it in a deck with the Goblin Electromancer and Baral and potentially fire this off for 1. Which, don't get me wrong, that has there's something there that's appealing to me. I still don't love the card. I think it's rather low impact. I think we can probably find this effect somewhere else, or something that replicates this sort of effect more effectively. But I mean, I can understand why, if you're playing on a tight budget, this could be something that you look at and include, because of the fact that it does offer you something. I still think it's a little on the low impact side. I would rather do something different with my card slot and my mana.
The last thing is, a lot of those scry commanders that care about scrying really like this card because of the synergy with the commander, like Elminster and the Simic Elf that does the stuff.
Oh, Galadriel?
The blue bird. Yeah, and the Sphinx that says whenever you scry, draw that many cards. So it is a 3-mana draw 3.
I guess, yeah. I mean, yeah, those are also...
So, again, these are very niche things, so it's not like...
Yeah.
I just figured we'd put this up because it's a great budget option. It's a card people kind of slept on in the set when it came out. It was used in Standard for a bit in Strixhaven, I remember, with the whole lesson thing.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I think it is just a neat card that, if you're looking for some way to move the deck. But anyway, so that comes to our next sort of segment, right? Deck building in general. There was an individual that I discovered on YouTube that had been not playing the game for a very long time. And had posted a video about how to win more games in Commander, based on their experiences with the format as well as their overall experience, because they were not new to TCGs. They had played other TCGs before getting into Commander. So the video is very well organized, but I know we both have some thoughts about the overall mentality behind the person that had done this video. But I guess simply, if you want to go into the detail, Bruce, that'd be great. So, about the mentality of...
Well, I mean, so this particular content creator approached the game from trying to help people win more games, and he went through in quite a bit of detail how he proceeded to approach the game to maximize his chance to win. And as a premise, that's not necessarily a bad way to construct a way of evaluating the game, because of the fact that essentially, when we all sit down to play, winning at some level is one of the motives behind playing. We'd like to win. And so helping people win more games is ultimately something that's going to be good feedback. Now, as you as I went through the video, there were some things that I definitely took came to mind as being some red flags around the way that this player approached playing the game. And that's where I'm going to start. So I think the first thing where approaching the game from the standpoint, he says in his article that, or in his video, that he wants to win the game in the most expedient fashion possible. All right. So to me, that's a red flag right from the outset, because I'm not going to say winning expediently is a bad thing, but if your primary goal is to win expediently, then the mindset you're approaching is going to be far closer to a truly competitive mindset than it is to be playing a casual game of Commander. So if I sit down on a Friday night with some buddies and we're going to play Commander, and one of my buddies goes for a very quick column line kill to wipe the table out, then I'm going to say, "Whoa! Is that how it's going to be all night?" And if he says, "Yeah, I want to win as quickly as I possibly can," you're now creating the mindset or the situation where this player is actively looking to pub stomp over and over and over again because he wants to win repeatedly, and there's going to cause quite a bit of friction in your playgroup.
Even if it's like accidental, like I know I did this with you guys last week, was it, when we played together?
Yeah.
Or 2 weeks ago, when I was able to get out my Voltron commander on turn 3 and then proceed to kill all the players by like turn 5.
Yes.
And it didn't. I felt bad because I was like I knew that the power level was not the same, but I also didn't expect to go that fast because it's very a glass cannon of a deck, and it's not that consistent. It just reminded me, like, you're basically taking that and you're doing that all the time, but you're not at the CDH level. You're at the rungs below it, which creates this complicated arms race that he didn't really exhibit.
Well, so he didn't speak to that, and I think it speaks to the fact that his experience has only been ever in a local game store. And I think one of the things he forgets when he provides this sort of feedback to people, that there's a wide majority of people, and I would say it's probably the overwhelming preponderance of people in Commander, never darken the store door. They buy their packs, or they get their cards sent to them, or whatever, and they go home and they play at home. Whether they play with friends, or they play with family, or they play at home. They're not playing in a store. And so, if that's the case, you're probably developing either a group of friends or a group of acquaintances that play together regularly because either you live in close proximity or you've got invested history with each other, and so you're going to know each other. And this approach of consistently trying to win as quickly as possible is going to result in some really serious problems in your play group. The first one being that the other players are going to get wise to this pretty quickly. And they're going to say, well, we need to do something to actively counteract you, and the arms race begins. This is how arms races start in play groups, and it's not always healthy. The second thing that's going to happen is that they're going to stop inviting you because they're tired of having you win so quickly, because for some of these players, and I would count myself as one of them, winning is not necessarily the sole outcome I'm looking for in my Commander game. I am looking for an experience. I am sitting down and I'm investing a couple of hours on my Saturday night or my, whatever night of the week I'm sitting down to play, and I would like to have an experience where we do something and there's some back and forth. And I've often told Pete, there's some storytelling to my game, and where there's like the big baddie Pete comes along and like I can derail Pete and stop Pete, and the other guy does something, and when it swings back and forth, it's exciting.
There's a give and take.
It's fun and it's engaging. And then at the end, when something happens and everything goes kaboom and we have a winner, cool, that's awesome. There's a story that I can tell there. Yeah. And if once in a while, like having somebody win quickly is not a bad thing. I have no problem with when Grevin beat us very quickly, I have no problem with that. If that happened every time, I would have a problem with it.
Yeah. Even CDH has these crazy stories as well, like Play to Win and some of these other more famous creators that do these games a lot. They have really crazy stack interactions. They have really intense matchups with different decks of balancing each other out. That's I think what's missing is that balance. Where the mindset of winning versus the mindset of fun, you can still try to do both. You just have to know the other people are on the same level of you as you. You can't just, expect. So it kind of falls into this idea of like, this person is playing the deck in the game, in a sense. And that also goes to the deck building process, which he has a good outline, which we'll get to in a second. But me and you, Bruce, and other players that we play with, for the most part, they're not playing just winning. They're playing the people. They're playing with the people across from them.
Yeah.
Like actually messing around, like saying dumb things to each other between turns, or like making silly politicking plays, which was not a mention at all in this video.
No, not explicitly.
Even in CDH, even in CDH, they do politicking all the time. That's just how the game functions. So, yeah, again, this falls into the mentality, and then just if you can fit in with the people that you play with, it'll be easier to like, okay, I have the chance to win the game this time, but I don't necessarily might not have the chance to win it the next time.
Right.
But no one's gonna ban you from their table. You know what I mean? You want to get invited back. With that, and then this goes into the politicking part, basically, right? Because he mentioned that to win games, you have to sandbag, but not in terms of holding your cards. Like, I've had people hold really good cards against me and said at the end of the game, oh, I could have won the game, but I sandbagged. No, he means like, I'm going to wait till I got to strive for second throughout the whole game in terms of being in the lead, and then I'm going to pull ahead at the end. In sort of like it sounded more manipulative, but Bruce, do you remember any other details? I mean, this seemed rather
so the first thing you talked about was how
interesting.
He valued sandbagging his interaction. And so essentially he would do his part to try and convince his opponents to use their interaction in lieu of him using his. And really
burning their stuff before he burns his, sort of idea.
Now, look, everybody who's played more than a handful of Commander games has done this. We've all played like the game of chicken with the other guy saying, are you going to counter it or am I going to counter it? Are you going to counter it or am I going to counter it? And if somebody blinks, then someone else burns their removals or their counter spell and not you. And you're like, yeah, I did it. But at no point is that an active component of our strategy that you are trying to use. That's a measure of gamesmanship, politicking. Maybe you made a deal or like something, but it's not.
There's a difference between holding removal and purposefully being like, oh, I don't like.
Yes.
Like trying to manipulate the other person to like side with you. In the game. There's two different things.
This is what you're getting at. So like there's the playing the game where you might hold your stuff, and what this guy's doing is actually advocating for a different approach that is, I would go and argue, is deceitful and is going to wrinkle your play group quite significantly. Because, again, if you're playing with a dedicated play group where you play regularly, where you go to LGS, they see you time and time again, and this is the stunt you pull, where you pull your punches and you sandbag your stuff, and you force your opponents into the spot where it's either you got to answer it because I'm not. Well, then you're going to find your player like, you know what, again, I'm not interested in playing with you because I don't find that the way you come to the table is necessarily in the spirit of the game.
It's also not a threat assessment either. Like, there's a difference between, okay, is this person a threat, right? Do you have an answer to that? I might.
Yeah.
Do you have an answer to that? I do. Do I care about this? No.
Exactly.
Like, most people are pretty honest about, I don't care about this problematic permanent right now or this problematic thing. You deal with it, right? That's a very direct and fine way to do it. But if you're like, the opposite of it is like, someone's like, oh, this is a huge problem, and we all know it's a huge problem, like a heuristic study or something.
Right.
And you have the opportunity to blow it up, but you refuse to, basically giving them the advantage, so that way they're targeted by the other two players very heavily, and then you take advantage of that situation.
Yeah.
That just seems a little slimy.
I think that is something that is,
I don't know.
That is, I really when I heard that, I was like, this is a red flag to me. Like, this would be something where I'm like, this guy may win more games than I do, but I think if this is how you get uninvited to the play group instead of invited back to play, and like that to me is taking a big L instead of taking a little L, losing the game. And like it was like losing a game is not inherently the problem; it's taking the big L and not being invited back. That's a big problem. And this is how you do it.
Yeah. And there's no obligation for you to be like, oh yeah, I have an answer, and I'm just not gonna I'm gonna use it. Like, you don't have to do that. You can use it. You can choose to do whatever you want. But it's that mindset of I'm gonna win at any cost is what turns us off.
Yeah.
And then the final thing, which is something that we actually enjoyed, was
can I speak one more point of this? So the other piece you spoke to was the idea that he's looking to actively be slow rolling his deck, so he's not in the lead.
Right. The sandbag sort of idea.
The being second and being the second person to pop off, because essentially the first person who pops off then becomes arch enemy, and the other three players at the table all team up to answer their threat of running away with the game. And what he's saying is like, I don't want to be first. I want to be second. I don't want to pop off second because then they've used up their resources to try and fight them. So it gives me ample opportunity to win the game. Again, anybody who's played Commander has had this occur, where the guy who was not leading right away, but came up either second or third, won the game because they were able to. They had a slow start and caught up and drew great top decks, whatever. But it's not an active component of your strategy. And anytime where you can legitimately look at your opponents in the eye and say, my strategy is that I'm going to be second and pop off after you. I'm sorry? Now, I mean, I can understand the strategy behind it, but if that's what you're looking to do every time, you know what eventually I'm going to get wise to, Pete? That this is what you're doing.
Right.
And you know what I'm going to do then?
You're going to see it for what it is. You're going to eliminate that person first. At all.
Like we've actually addressed this on the show, where there are people that you play with, Pete, who openly told you in the pregame stage before the game even starts, Pete's a problem. We need to deal with you. This is the answer. when people like this guy are advocating popping off second, like, you don't advocate popping off second. Now, you do have things that allow you to pop off and win, but it's not what you're looking to
It happens.
do. It happens. But this guy is making it part of
you're not actively sitting there. Yeah, you're not sitting there and, like, you're trying, if you're really trying to win, like this person is saying, then you're trying to win. If you have the opportunity, you can't play, like, I like to say play scared, but that's not exactly what this is.
No.
This is actively just sitting there, taking advantage of that there's three other players at the table.
This is being a predator.
Because if this was one-on-one, you would lose.
This is being a predator.
It is. It is being predatory.
You're preying on the opposition and looking to exploit essentially a gap. And because, and this is what's going to happen if your play group gets wise to this, they're going to do what you already object to, Pete. They're going to say, well, Pete's a problem, or they say, Bruce does this all the time. Bruce is an issue. We need to deal with Bruce quick. Yeah. Well, you're going to find that you're not second, you're fourth.
Unwelcome.
And very quickly finding yourself wiped off the table. And then, well, if you don't change your ways, you're going to be asked, could you not come back, please? And thank you. So, to me, this was another red flag of this particular mindset, because I feel like it's very short-term focused of, I'm going to do this now to win this game here, and knowing that I may not play this trio again. But if you play with the same groups of players over and over again, and that's one of the things we've encountered. We play a lot together, Pete and I, or my brother, or a few of my other friends. When we play together frequently, we know, and it's like I can't let you do this. I'm going to have to. It may not be the right attack from just looking at the board, but with past knowledge being what it is, I know that if I don't keep Pete in check, Pete's going to do this to me. So you're going to find this guy. going to see the win rate decrease as people grow accustomed to this sort of approach and are going to address it as so.
This reminds me of our good friend Mason when he used to play a lot with us, right? His mindset was really along the lines of, I value consistency if I win if I win, and it's because I put myself in the best probable scenario to do that, right?
Yeah.
Where this person is saying more so I can win because I am more efficient than X and X, which is not really a foolproof way to actually win games.
No, it's going to
because you can't quantify efficiency.
No,
like in that sense of the of how volatile this format is, and the amount of what I mean. Like a very experienced player will just look at that person, laugh, and be like, okay, and then just beat them into the dirt. I mean this is just a different. I think with time we might see a change.
Yeah. So anyway. Those are some of the primary points that I sort of took umbrage with. I do find that there was something that he provided that was very helpful to players.
Yeah.
So I think
that was the deck building strategy,
the deck building strategies that I think was something that what he did is he laid out essentially his recipe for brewing up a deck. And look, I know there are going to be people who take exception with the numbers and the ratios of what he's proposing, but I think inherently this was probably the strongest part of his video, because what it did is it provided a framework for a player who may be less experienced in building decks, maybe somebody like myself, who is an older mindset that when 2014, when I started playing the game, again, 6 to 7 drops were the norm. And a particular guy is, advocating a mindset that's a little bit different, and I can learn something from that. So this framework is quite helpful. He's prescriptive in like how much of this type of card, that type of card, this type of card he's going to put in his deck to maximize whatever effect he's coming to reach. And I think that's something that is useful.
I also like that he's very clear about and consistent about how he views the deck building process, because I know from personal experience sometimes you get all over the place when you're trying to make something happen with your formula of deck building, and trying to figure out maybe on like Moxfield or something, but then maybe you just have a pile of cards.
You try to make fetch happen.
Yeah. So that was something I enjoyed. Granted, my style is very different than this person in regards to how the deck is constructed, because he values specific numbers for like removal and like ramp for every deck. But like for me, I think of it more of like an abstract, like depending on what colors you're playing really will depend on how much removal you can play or what your deck's trying to do. Like a Voltron deck really doesn't need a ton of targeted removal. They just need to protect their guy. Or like a token deck is usually going super wide, so you probably don't need a board wipe in that particular deck. Go ahead.
Well, so I think what do you think? What he specifically said was the interaction, not necessarily removal. So, and the interaction can be protection style.
Right, there's difference.
So he's just looking at ways to make sure that you don't necessarily just get blown out by your opponent. So I think like people are going to read that or listen to that and say, "Oh, he's advocating for this many removal spells." No. He's not saying removal spells. Yeah. He's saying you need some combination of removal or protection or artifact destruction or enchantment removal or whatever it is you need in your deck. Mm-hmm. And so you need that.
I think.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I just think the interaction idea for this person is very too broad.
Mm.
I think it's a rather of being proactive and reactive, like we've discussed in the past.
Right.
Where it's like, does it further my game plan, or does it stop my opponents from furthering their game plan?
Right.
To help me stay in line with them, So, and removal is part of that piece, and protecting your stuff is also part of that piece. So I didn't like. I guess maybe I confused myself with that concept, because I was taught when I started playing the game that interaction was basically removing a problematic thing,
right?
That could prevent you from winning the game. where I think he's looking at it, which is a good way to look at it too, is it's not just removing things, it's about your game plan in general. What can you do to help you further your win percentage?
Right.
I'm saying that as like a laugh, but
Well, it's inherently what you're trying to do. Like if you think that every game people have a 25% chance of winning the game, you would and you're trying to give yourself maximum edge to up that. Like you're looking to up that.
Yeah.
So, and this interaction package that he's trying to give you that edge, so you have a better chance of winning your match. And so, I take that, and I think perhaps some of the way thinking about it, as we identify, is like this is kind of a rigid way of thinking about things, because I think your more flexible approach is going to, or more nuanced approach is going to allow you to look at your deck more holistically and say, okay, I know what the numbers say, and I've built my framework in this way, sort of reflective of what this guy is advocating, and say to myself, okay, but do I really need all this? Because if I can do this and this and this and this becomes redundant. And out comes a piece of interaction because you don't need it now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the piece that that's not being reflected in this sort of catch-all framework. And now that's, and so it's going to allow you as a deck builder to do the process of revising your deck. And I think this is what the part that sort of gets passed over in this video, that the revision of your deck is actually an integral stage of your deck development, because you're looking to evaluate what
competing with
what different cards are offer, and then you say, oh, this is a really good card. And I'm going to use an example here of a card that is unlikely that people are going to ever consider cutting for a deck. But if you're playing a red deck and you take out Chaos Warp, everyone goes, oh, how can you take out Chaos Warp? That's a premium piece of interaction for a red deck. And like, yeah, but it doesn't synergize with this or that or this thing, that thing, the other thing. It's just a generically good card. But if I take
just a good card on its face.
Yeah, but if I take it out and I put this other thing in, now I don't have to worry about the removal because this breaks shielded for this or like whatever the impact is.
Yeah.
And so, you look at his raw numbers and you say, well, you took out a piece of interaction. Like, how can that ever be the right answer? But if you look at what your deck is individually doing, you might realistically decide, actually, Chaos Warp isn't great for my deck. It's more mana that I want to dedicate to this particular effect. I would rather play a Lightning Bolt. Maybe that's the answer. You decide.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for a cheap one mana thing that I can do that's going to impact the board. Great. Maybe that's all you really need.
I wanted to briefly jump back to the redundancy part of it. So that's kind of how I looked at it. I remember he said for like a sacrifice deck, you want to put all the sacrifice type effects in the deck to increase the consistency. So he was basically saying,
threat density.
Yeah, he was the density, and he was like, you should probably add like 10 to 16 things that have sacrifice that make so your deck can sacrifice things and do that. But I've made that pitfall before myself, where it's not exactly the way that a deck, in my opinion, should function. And I'm not the telltale person for this sort of thing, but I've thrown every single piece of sacrifice into a deck, and it didn't even do much because there was just too much of it, which is weird to say, but like there's a difference between consistency and redundancy, and the ability to actually like play with the cards that you tutor for or have drawn. And like put it all together as the puzzle is put together. Like there's a reason that landfall strategies are kind of like that. You throw everything in there and it kind of just does its thing, but it doesn't always work out every single time.
Oh, landfall is probably a poor example, because there's so many ways to make landfall pop off because you're playing something that just you do anyway. But I take your point. Like I've had the same struggle.
Like throwing every single landfall payoff into a deck not necessarily will make the deck super fantastic. You know what I mean? It's not gonna. It might do a bunch of things, and then it's not a great example, like in terms of the consistency versus redundancy thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think
you know what I'm trying to say. Maybe I don't know.
No, I do, because your problem. Like I have a Dagatar deck, and there's a million plus symbols and counter synergies that can be slammed to the deck. And the puzzle is, how do I assemble a Dagatar to get the most out of my deck? And that's really the $1 million question. And one of the reasons I find Daguitar appealing, because it's so there's so many good payoffs and ways to make +1/+1 counter themed decks work. But where do you draw the line for the +1/+1 counter payoffs versus the actual I'm just going to win now. This is the card I'm going to use to get me the win. And I mean, that balancing, that puzzle that never really gets reflected anywhere in this video. And as you refine it down, no, I could play this +1/+1 counter synergy. Every time you get a +1/+1 counter, do this thing. Okay, but is it what my deck needs right now? And maybe it's not.
And I think to bring this full circle, it's if you think about it as your deck is trying to do a specific thing every time you sit at a table with some random people, I think the deck building mindset will change, because it's not necessarily you're trying to win, because there's no guarantee you'll win at all any time you play. But if you look at it as I want my deck to make a bunch of dudes, a bunch of tokens, then the deck process will be, well, how do I accomplish that? And then what would be the biggest thing that would mess with my board? It'd probably be a Wrath of God effect, right?
Yeah.
Very simply. Or if I'm trying to combo, how can I prevent people from killing me faster than I can combo with whatever combo I'm trying to win with? And what are cards that I would consider to protect myself? What are cards that I would consider that probably are not necessary? And what are cards that are on the cusp of being there, but maybe I'm trying to go an artifact strategy instead of an aristocrat token strategy, but I'm playing a lot of small things. So, I don't know. It just depends, right? It's very subjective. And I'm grateful for this video, because it's definitely let me reevaluate my own process of building.
Absolutely. I think
mindset,
there was stuff to that it was good food for thought from the standpoint of really evaluating what do I why do I not like this video as much as I think I should? Because I should want to win, but what about this video makes me double back and say, wait a minute. I actually watched it twice, because I was I don't know how I feel about this. And I started putting my thoughts down, and I'm okay. So it's starting to speak to my own philosophy around how I approach the game. And it was a really interesting process by which to do. I'm going to put it in the show notes, their audience. So if you're interested in seeing the video, actually both the videos that we used, I will put them in the
I think it's good to see other perspectives with this, and just looking at, because nobody's right or wrong. It's more so just a style. It's just a marketable style.
Yeah. So anyway, it was good. It was very good food for thought, and while I don't necessarily agree with all the points raised by both of the creators, I think they definitely gave us some things to consider, and ways that we can conceptualize the game in a way that's actually still meaningful, even if they weren't speaking entirely to the way we approach the game.
Moving forward, I'm hoping that we can find some more of these. I mean, I love game theory, I guess, but maybe even just simple. I saw this video, not video. This it was a deck list of an Azorius equipment deck, and it was similar to our discussion earlier, where it was how do we make this thing run? And what are we trying to prevent? What are the pitfalls of this strategy? Because every strategy has weaknesses, and I like that framework as well in this discussion. So in the future,
well, I mean,
I'm sure we're gonna.
I'm going to be very honest with you. I've now built Odric the Blood Curse, and it's a Boros card that looks like it should be a terrible commander, and but how do I make this not be a terrible commander? And I think I've found an interesting way of approaching that, without it being truly just a stock list. I think I've got an interesting twist on that. So how do you take a deck that is shouldn't really work as well as it does, and turn it into something that works well, and people go, wow, that's really interesting.
That was interesting.
Yeah, I've had. I mean, I played my Odric Blood Curse deck, and I had a table of guys go, that's neat. I mean, you didn't win the game, but that
And that should be the point, right?
yeah, I'm like, yeah,
Like, it's memorable.
yeah.
It's not memorable doing a Thassa's Oracle combo
For the millionth
when
time,
you sit down. People have seen that 100 times.
100.
People have seen it online and have witnessed it and have played it. It's not that exciting. So I guess our final food for thought for our audience is, when you're playing decks and building decks, think about, like, what memories can I create? Like, what are some weird things that I can do that people are like, whoa, I don't see that every single day. Because that's the point of Commander, right? It's like playing cards that you would never see in 60 card constructed for the most part.
Agreed.
And showing really how messed up this game really is.
Well, I think you're right. I think it's memories, it's experiences, it's building those.
That's so corny. It's cringy, but it's okay.
Well, I mean, it might be, but, like, I'm sorry to say, like, I don't play the game because I win all the time. I don't win all the time. I actively don't. I think my win rate would be among the poorest of anybody I play with. But at the end of the day, I keep coming back because
everyone wants to play with you, though.
I like to think so.
But everybody wants to play with you.
I think people are into, like, what is Bruce going to do? And I think, that's part of the fun. And I think that's what brings me back to the game, and why I would like to encourage other people to come to the game, because you can find lots of fun and interesting things to do in this great game with all these interesting things to do. I'm looking around my table at all the cool cards on my tabletop that I could put in decks, and I don't have enough time in my lifetime to play all these cool cards. So anyway, I think with that, I think it's just about time to wrap it up. But as always,
have a good week, everybody.
Well, before we go, thank yous to do. So thank you to the Lotus Council Discord once again.
Oh yeah.
If you want to find the show, you can find us there. You can find us on social media at all the different places. All those in the show notes. We have a big thank you to Nick Douglas for our great intro and outro music. We would, if we didn't say thank you to him for his contribution, we'd be doing him a big disservice.
Yeah.
And if you want to find us on all the on Moxfield, you can find us the username the Epic Experiment Podcast as our username, so you can find all of our decks.
The little handle.
So anyway, with that, folks,
all right,
peace.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.